Try this again. This is Hope from Pros Before Bros. Thank you for coming by and watching this part 2 of my book reads for November. From my previous video, what was it that the 90s shows used to say? Um, in the last episode, I talked to you guys about um, three books that were complete misses for me. So this is going to be the books that actually were very good. Some 5 stars and some 4 stars. So I'm just going to hop right into it, tell you why I graded them the way I did and what I liked about them. So I got my other phone here. That way I could go ahead and pull up my Goodreads account. If you guys, I don't know if I've ever even mentioned it. I have a Goodreads account, but I don't really write too many reviews out on there. I usually just keep track of the books that I liked and didn't like. That way I can kind of keep track of my reading log. It just seems to be more accessible that way. So I don't really advertise that I have a Goodreads account for that reason, because it's just for my personal, what is it, personal logging or personal whatever. But yeah, there are quite a few books here. So I had two 5 stars and 3 4 stars. Actually, 4 4 stars for the month of November. Um, so let's just jump into it. So the first book that I gave a 5 star review for, and I'm surprised I didn't do this book for October because it has that supernatural vibe to it. That book is Ghostland, An American History in Haunted Places by Colin Dickey. And let's go ahead and get that to you guys right here. Do you guys see that? Hell no, because I got it like clear on the other side. Sorry, guys. So it's Ghostland. That's the cover of it. Now, this book has been out for a little while. It's been out since 2016, but I guess you would consider it autobiography or a study in cultural things. Basically, Colin goes around the country and visits these highly, I'm trying to think of the word to describe it, um, popular places that are considered haunted. So he checks out the Winchester Mansion in California. He goes to Salem, Massachusetts. He goes to one of the prisons here in the Midwest, an abandoned prison in the Midwest, um, and a couple of little small places to discuss why they might be haunted. So he looks at everything in this book. So he looks at eyewitness accounts, he looks at urban legends or stories that have been passed on from generation to generation about the place. He looks at ghost hunters' perspectives, scientists. He gets a lot of different people in the mix of this particular book. And each case study, he tries to make it as thorough as possible. So one of the things that I've really enjoyed about this book is the fact that he just didn't come off being a skeptic with no open mind. Um, I've mentioned this in my previous, I think it was back in October when I was talking to you guys about some of my reads for October. So I actually lived in a haunted house. So I'm a firm believer of paranormal activity of some sort. I think that there's more than life and death. I think there's always some sort of story that goes after we have gone. Some people don't believe that. That's okay. Just from my personal experience in living in a haunted house for about 20 years with my family, I've had some weird things happen that I can't explain. I've tried to explain it. I've tried to find some sort of logic. I like to be one of those people that are, I believe in something, but I have to have something to back it up. That's how my perspective is. So I guess I start off as a skeptic with a lot of these cases. And Colin actually kind of had that same vibe too. Like he was interested in finding out details, but at the same time, he wanted to be realistic. If there was a logic behind some of the encounters that these people were having in the supernatural sense that could be explained in a natural sense, he was willing to listen to that. So he brought up some really good points with a lot of these historical places and urban legend that goes with it. So I'll use the example of the Winchester house. A lot of people know the story of Sarah Winchester as she had the Winchester fortune for Winchester Rifle Company. Her husband died, her daughter died. She had like a series of bad luck. Trying to figure out what was going on with her life, she went to a seance and basically was told by all these people that had died due to the Winchester rifles that she is cursed and she needs to build this massive house and have building 24/7 each day for it to keep the ghosts away, or the ghosts were going to kill her, essentially. So history has also played it as that she was just crazy. Urban legend itself has spun it to where she was crazy. And the cool thing that Colin did in this book, in that particular case study, is he went back inside her records for the house, looked at blueprints, pulled a lot of different testimonials out of the historical file for Sarah Winchester in this house. So we know that the house is huge. We know that it's built very odd and it has very interesting aspects to it. We'll just say that. So when he was doing his research, he found a few letters from an attorney that represented Sarah Winchester, but was also a close family friend. And one of the things that the attorney was talking about inside the letter is how Sarah Winchester was not crazy, that she was highly intelligent, that she was sane of mind. There was absolutely nothing wrong with her. So he was able to debunk essentially that she wasn't crazy. Another thing that he found out was through the blueprints and through journals from Sarah and just testimonials from people that knew her. He was able to find out that she didn't just randomly build all these rooms for no particular reason. The house that she initially started with, the basic frame of it was a farmhouse. She bought that home and knew that she wanted to add on to it eventually. But a lot of people didn't know that she was very interested in architecture and construction. She played a very high role in picking up a hammer and actually building the house up herself. She had workers, yes. They weren't working 24/7 like a lot of the urban legend has claimed. But she was very heavily involved in building the house herself, utilizing the tools and designing the house around her. Back then, that would have been kind of frowned upon, considering it's like the late 1800s and she's a woman. She shouldn't know anything about construction or architecture for that matter. So she kind of learned it by herself, utilizing resources such as books and just hanging out with other people, contractors, and kind of learning the trade that way. So I think, with that being said, I think the reason why the house got as big as it was is because she was simply trying to experiment and trying to figure out how to create these houses or these big structures. And the only way she could do that was through her own house. So it was really interesting to see some of the logic that is behind the stories, comparing the urban legends to what was actually true. And several of these case studies that Colin did throughout the book are very similar to that. There was also a case study that he did in Oregon focusing on like a murder case from 40s. And some of the things just wasn't adding up. A lot of people were saying that the landmark in this particular murder case was 2 blocks away from where the body was found, and there was no physical evidence to prove that the body was linked to the landmark for any given reason at all. So I thought that was really interesting how he would take facts and kind of compare them to what the urban legend was and determine through those facts and through science that some of the things that we think are spooky aren't necessarily as spooky as we would like them to be. So that definitely was a 5-star read. I was super, super intrigued by it. I enjoyed it quite a bit. And you can tell when I enjoy a book because usually I blab to my husband about it for a couple hours. I probably drove him nuts with that book. So the next book that I read that was a 5-star is a middle grade book actually, and that is Ban This Book by Alan Gratz. This book was released last September, and it follows the story of a little girl who one day goes into her school library and goes to go pick up her favorite book that she has borrowed almost every single week since she started middle school, finds that's gone. It turns out that the book was added to a ban list. Shortly after that, a bunch of other books end up in the ban list. And through this process, at first, the little girl is very accepting of it. She's not happy about it, but she doesn't feel comfortable to express her dissent, if you will. And over time, she develops what is called a banned book library using her locker. So she gets reading material out to her classmates. It's very underground. It's really neat that she does it this way. And it's very thought-provoking. So during this course of time, she's put in a position where she has to go in front of the PTA. I got the hiccups. The PTA to discuss why she did this because she's found out. And it's very thought-provoking, and she finally gets her voice, and she's able to plead her case and win the case. It's such a great book. It was a very fast read, again, because it's middle grade. But I think that it could go with anybody, any interest out there. I don't think it's just middle grade that needs to read this. I think probably all of us really need to take a point in reading this and discussing what's right and what can we deem as wrong in terms of literature. Really great book. I really enjoyed it. And I ended up giving that a 5-star as well. Oh, let's see here. Moving on. The next book that I deemed a 4-star rating is My Best Friend's Exorcism by Grady Hendrix. Now, Grady Hendrix is a contemporary horror novelist. He is really awesome. He did the Horror Store book that is basically a contemporary horror of a mock-up store of IKEA. It's not IKEA though, it's called something else. He recently did We Sold Our Souls, and he also wrote a book about paperbacks from the 1980s, horror paperbacks. And that's called Paperbacks from Hell, and that's actually on my reading list for this month as well. And he's really awesome. I actually met him at one of the book cons here in Cincinnati, and he is a character. I mean, he came in a bright red velour blazer. He was amazing. So yes, I read My Best Friend's Exorcism. I gave that 4 stars. This was released back in 2016. It follows the friendship of Abby. I want to keep saying Gabby. Abby and Gretchen in 1986. And both girls are close best friends. They've been through a lot of things together, and Gretchen ends up being possessed by a demon. So many cultural references, pop culture references are made in this book. There's a scene where in the middle of an exorcism, Abby forgets basically the biblical parts of the rites that you give in an exorcism. So she ends up using things from their friendship, like she makes a reference to the Go-Go's, and she makes a reference to like Phil Collins or something like that. It was hilarious and it was endearing, and I loved that book so much. I enjoyed it because it was very it was just really cute. It was a testament to a friendship. So I gave that 4 stars as well. I really enjoyed it, and I can't wait to read. We lost. I keep saying that we sold our souls. That's actually another one that's on my list. Next book I had read was This Song Will Save Your Life by Leah Sales. This is a 4 star read for me as well. It's a young adult contemporary released back in 2013, so it's a little bit aged. It follows the story of a girl by the name of Elise. Elise is 16 years old, and she battles with depression, and she had a suicide attempt at one point. So this book does have some triggers in it. I will warn you. As a survivor of that myself, I had to kind of flip a couple pages to keep from any sort of triggers. Excuse me. Because there were some triggers in it. But it basically follows the story of this young girl who stays with her mom some weeks and stays with her dad some weeks. She stays with her mom's on Thursday nights because they're both divorced. And on Thursday nights, she likes to go for midnight walks. And during one of these midnight walks, she meets a couple girls and becomes best friends with them. One of them is Vicky. The other one, I can't remember her name, but she ends up not really having a very good relationship with her. But bottom line is they're girls that go to this club. It's an underground club, really strong on the music scene. And they become friends. And during this process, Elise meets a boy that is nicknamed Char. He's a DJ at this club, and she becomes fascinated with DJing. And it turns out to be her passion, and it turns out to be something that quite literally saves her life in the long run. It makes her feel like she fits in somewhere. It's a beautiful book. I think it has so many great messages out there, especially for any teenager that is going through a rough patch, that there's always something that can keep you alive. In this case, it was music that kept Elise going, and it also helped her establish a friendship and learn about love and learn about heartbreak. It was definitely a quick read. I believe I finished that book in one day as well. I thoroughly enjoyed it. So even though it's a little aged, it was kind of neat. But also another thing I liked about it, I know I say I don't like pulp culture references that much, but when it's music, it's kind of okay with me. They talked about some of the music, and they actually had like a little playlist in the back of the book, and it covers bands that, you know, I absolutely loved. Like, see, The Cure was mentioned, Blur was mentioned. Basically, all these really popular bands in the underground club environment. So, it made me definitely pull out my playlist and start listening to songs after that. Really good book. The next book that I will talk about here, let's see, there's Into the Drowning Deep. I gave that 4 stars as well. Really interesting read. It is a horror based on killer mermaids. The only thing is, it could be a little bit rough at times to keep up with the characters because there's quite a few characters that pop up inside the book. So you have to kind of take your time with reading it. But that was Into the Drowning Deep by Mira Grant. And it could be quite gory too. This one was released back in December 2017. And then the last book that I absolutely positively adored, and I picked it up on a whim, was The Boy in the Black Suit, and that's by Jason Reynolds. This book was quite beautiful, and it was released back in February 2015. Follows the story of a teenager by the name of Matt. Matt loses his mother to breast cancer, and he has to grow up really quick overnight. His father is an alcoholic, so he's dealing with that. He's basically trying to find comfort somewhere, and honestly he can't get that at home because his father's drinking a lot. and he's trying to find stability. He's trying to find ways to make ends meet financially. So he ends up putting applications in one day, and Mr. Reynolds, the neighborhood funeral home director, sees him putting these applications in with this fast food place and says, instead of doing that, why don't you come work for me? There was some hesitation on Matt's part because he didn't know if he was ready to face death head on every single day as a job. But finally one day he does, and it ends up being a part of his grieving process is to help these other families find closure. One of the things that he does is he sits inside the funerals that he helps with, and he learns the stories of these people that are deceased and how they positively impacted so many lives around them, and even in just the smallest way. So he learns about all these people in his community, and it's such a touching book. And he also has a brush with first love, and it's one of those books. Now, there's only been like 3 or 4 books I can name off the top of my head that physically have made me cry. And that would be The Hate U Give. I cried hardcore when I read that. Anne of Green Gables. Let's see what else. Where the Red Fern Grows. I cried when I read that. But this is a solid number 4. The Boy Who Wore the Black Suit. I was crying when I was reading this book because there's just so many emotions. And you feel his pain, you feel his happiness. It's an incredible book. So if you haven't read it yet, definitely pick it up. And it does have so much diversity in it. A majority of the characters are Black. So you hear about the community and how grassroots everything was. And it's such an amazing book. I wish I would have known about it sooner because I think I would have really enjoyed it 2 years ago as well. I did give it 4 stars on Goodreads because the ending, I wish that there was just a little bit more. But in reality, I'd probably give it 4.75 or a 5-star even. It was quite good. It was quite good. So good that it choked me up. Just messing with you, but it was a very good book. So those were the books that were hits for November of 2018. Definitely check those books out. If you don't have access to those books at like a Barnes & Noble or a bookstore, I'm sure your local library would have copies of it. Definitely check out the Libby app. That's Libby. It'll get you a connection to your local library's electronic database, so you'll have their ebooks, their audiobooks. That's a majority of my content comes from. I don't necessarily buy those books right off the bat because I'm an adult. I have bills. So yeah, those are the books that I was quite pleased with for November. If you have any favorites or if you read any of those books at all, please make sure to comment below, give me your thoughts, or any questions that you might have. Thank you so much for watching part 2 of my November reads, and have a good night. Bye.